Hey guys, XBadgerKnight here. Long time no see. I finally managed to finish Persona 3 Reloaded, and well, it left me wanting, but not in a good way. I really wanted to enjoy this game, but from what content it both retains and refreshes from both Persona 5 Royal and from previous versions of Persona 3, it all leaves me feeling kind of bittersweet after the fact. I am hesitant to call this game mid, but yeah, that's kind of how I felt for most of my experience here. There are a few standout moments that really hit me in the gut, but to my recollection, Reload seemed more interested in dragging its feet both in terms of how the plot is paced and with how the game often forces you to drag your own feet to be in lockstep with its poor pacing as well. Let me be clear though, regardless of what I say in this video, I am very much glad that I played Persona 3 Reloaded. But as of now, I'm going to categorize Persona 3 Reload as the best 7.5 out of 10 game that I have played in recent memory, which is by all means a compliment. As far as I am concerned, there are two kinds of mediocre games. The ones that are asinine and painfully average to play and experience due to them feeling like an utter slog. Conversely, there are some games out there that do shine a little bit brighter for all its facets that do try to bog it down. Persona 3 is the latter kind of game for me. It's sort of paradox of brilliance, filled with mind-numbing and asinine mistakes that Atlas still has not rectified despite Persona 3 being 17 years old at this point and having two other versions of the game to look back in retrospect to improve upon the shortcomings of those particular versions. This then brings up more issues with the discourse and my thoughts for this particular video on Persona 3 Reloaded as well. While this video is mostly going to be about relaying my own subjective experiences with Persona 3 Reloaded, I have to talk about the previous versions of the game that are nearly 2 decades old at this point, to then compare and contrast with the remaster too. After all, we do live in an era of remasters and remakes for old media. One big giant Ouroboros that the games industry perceives as the next big giant gravy train. Now, if the goal of Reloaded was to create a remake of the feel of the original Persona 3, the original jank of the PS2 port, something that keeps everything mostly intact from the original experience, then that is absolutely what Reloaded has succeeded in doing. Its identity remains mostly intact with small facelifts courtesy of Persona 5 Royal's innovations on combat, along with some innovations Portable brought to the table, but Reload fails to take innovations from Persona 5 Royal in order to make the plot and the social links more worthwhile. The first 30 odd hours of Persona 3 is kind of a drag, but after that, it gets its first wind, and then towards the end of the game, when you start to see where everything is going, it gets its second wind, and then it becomes very good. But until you reach that point, it's a bit of a slog. And that is essentially what I'm going to try to relate to you guys throughout most of this video until we come around to, well, the strong point of Persona 3, the theming. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, no, come on! Oh my god, are you kidding me? Oh, what the fuck ever. Oh, yeah, in case it wasn't clear, spoilers. I'm spoiling the entirety of Persona 3 Reload, Persona 3 Fez, Persona 5 Royal. Turn off the video now if you don't want to be spoiled. It has been a while since I touched Persona 3, and that wasn't really my choice. Firstly, I had a GameCube when I was a kid. Secondly, I had a friend who owned a copy of Persona 3 Fez, and we played it from time to time with a lot of 30 minutes of gaming time because our parents thought that video games were the devil for some reason or another. We were kind of forced to do so, play through a JRPG of all things without a memory card because our parents didn't understand the concept of saving games because they also still thought, contrary to our own frustrations with the matter, modern video game consoles still worked like arcade cabinets or old school NES cartridges, or saving was impossible, and starting over from scratch was a legitimate feature of the gameplay. We saved the game by leaving the console on in secret from our parents. I do vaguely recall from all those years ago was that I was seriously impressed by how much of a different game Persona 3 was from my own stock of, say, Mario Party, Super Mario Sunshine, or Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. What I do remember clearly from our time playing the game is, well, crushing on Mitsuru. Dosta. Reloaded did not help with this whatsoever.
For our final contestant of the day...
What happened? Is something wrong?
Last words after two that and the third.
Here we come! Out of my sight! C'est magnifique!
Now we're back all these years later to fully experience the game in its reloaded form. Having actually sat down, played through Persona 5 Royal at least twice, made several multi-hour videos on this very YouTube channel gushing about why I love the game and its characters so much, I've developed an appreciation for Persona as a franchise as well. While Persona 3 is no exception to this rule, I enjoyed it far less than Persona 5 Royal. There are facets of this game that Atlas has markedly improved upon, and other areas where I've chosen not to pull from Persona 5 or 4 to make the experience more enjoyable. At its most basic form, Persona 3 is a dungeon crawler with time management elements. Tartarus is the backbone of Persona 3, and every single mechanic within the game feeds right back into traversing the Dark Hour, the fights with all the Troll Shadows, and the final showdown with Nyx at the top of Tartarus. Allow me to be straight with you. I really hate Tartarus as a gameplay mechanic. And if it wasn't for the banger soundtrack Persona 3 has to offer, I would have put down the game if the soundtrack wasn't actively making me vibe along with the beats. Having the single dungeon as the main function of the game is a horrific idea, and its mere existence is turning me off from picking up Persona 3 yet again. I didn't have the same experiences with Mementos because, well, I genuinely was curious where all those train cars were going, as Mementos itself became more bone and viscera filled as I descended with the defeat of each palace ruler in Persona 5. Plus, Mementos was always something in the background of Persona 5 as well. The plot kept me engaged with the shenanigans of the various palace rulers and with the Phantom Thieves. To me, it was a place where I didn't feel like I was being pressured or compelled into progressing through, as the game was forcing me to the next border floor of Mementos. Even with the request system, I felt like I could keep up at a leisurely pace with the system as well, barring Ryuji making Royal's version of Mementos less arduous to drive through with its instant kill ability. Going through all the palaces always ensured that I had some cash, new personas, and XP on hand. With Tartarus in the Dark Hour, apart from the Love Hotel sequences, I didn't feel any sense of curiosity or fulfillment as I defeated the Tall Shadows and unlocked more floors of Tartarus with each full moon. Instead, I just felt stressed and bored as I dreaded doing the same shit for another 45 odd floors or so with a slightly different layout. Now, while Tartarus is still Tartarus in Reload, Atlas did include some quality of life changes to Reload that made traversing this place a little bit more bearable. Some mechanics still remain, but are remixed somewhat. For example, the shuffle time mechanic still remains, but instead of the cards you're given being completely randomized, you can now select from a set of rewards after completing an all-out attack. These rewards range from a skill card, HP or SP restorative effects, cold hard cash, or XP itself, or a new persona for yourself as well. Additionally, each time after you beat the 12 shadows in the game, or beat some of the mini-bosses behind the Monad doors, you're rewarded with a Major Arcana card, which grants you various buffs. If you collect enough of these cards during shuffle time, you'll receive an Arcana Burst, which raises the potency of the effects listed out previously having to do with money, XP, and otherwise. It's a great overhaul to the system, a great change that eliminates some of the random and arbitrary limitations of Tartarus from the other versions of Persona 3. It was a net positive for the remaster, I think, as well, as was the manner in which the exhaust mechanic was gutted from Reload as well. In portable and otherwise, this was the status ailment that your party members became afflicted with after participating in too many battles without rest. The effect in practice makes them take more damage than normal, be more susceptible to critical hits, make them more likely to miss attacks, making them have more trouble getting up when knocked down, with some outright relieving the party if they're taken back down to the first floor of Tartarus due to them being too exhausted to continue on. You can recover this contingent by not visiting Tartarus or participating in a full moon operation for 2 days, or if you're playing Portal, you can use a Yawn Be Gone to alleviate this ailment. While most will argue that this mechanic gave C some life as characters, I will refute that by saying that it's an artificial and annoying roadblock made to slow your progress within Tartarus. Most importantly, it robs me of my agency as a player. In a game with time management elements, the game pulling the rug from under me and wagging its finger as it does so is incredibly annoying and obnoxious. Now, if I have the time on my own and the SP to climb from the first floor of Tartarus all the way to the top, then by next, I will do it myself. Making me slog through Tartarus is already testing the limits of my patience, but making it even more arduous is an inane decision. I am glad that the fatigue system is going to Reloaded. In its place, your exploration in Tartarus is just limited by your SP and the amount of items you're willing to feed your own party, Fuka included, to keep up the scans and pre-battle buffs to deal with the gatekeepers. On the matter of this change as well, there is something that is missing from Reload that I do not exactly miss from Royal having to do with the combat, that of technical damage. In Persona 5 Royal, if you say put an enemy to sleep and attack with physical damage, or use nuclear damage on a burning enemy, the combination of these attacks will net you extra damage and down the enemy for a hold up. Functionally, it was the same as effectively hitting an enemy's weakness. There were many ways to trigger this technical damage, and as for myself, much satisfaction was derived from figuring out which attacks trigger it and then pulling them off effectively enough. However, as a gamer, I will always find a path to least resistance. In this case, it was mostly just using Dormima with On or Phantom Show as Joker to put the enemy to sleep, and then using Ryuji to follow up with a physical attack for the extra technical damage. As a result of me finding this path to least resistance, combat became very boring after it fell into this rotation. Now, in Reload, there are only two status ailments that cause effects similar to technical damage within the game, that being Freeze and Dizzy, which then increases your chances of taking a critical hit and being downed. On one hand, it is more balanced than Royal, but on the other hand, it not only dumbs down the combat, but it also makes wind and fire spells in Reload totally worthless as attacks. There is no burn status in Persona 3 Reload, so the absence of technical damage kinda makes part of Junpei and Yukari's kit useless. For fusing personas, there's also no reason to make a persona that uses straight fire or wind attacks over lightning or ice to then feed into more crits, to feed into more straight damage. I'm not exactly mourning over technical damage's absence in Persona 3 Reload, as I do agree that this is more a balancing change, but still, more complexity in combat is always a cool thing, at least as far as I'm concerned. Speaking of your party, there is another significant change to Tartarus that I need to talk about here as well. As I've said, I dislike game mechanics that rob me of my agency and leave things up to lotteries or random chances, which makes the way that Persona 3 handles the way that inactive party members catch up to your A team's XP and level incredibly obnoxious. Firstly, some context. In previous Persona games, like 3 and 4, the protagonist and the other 3 active party members of your team got XP. Those who are benched will never receive XP at all. Indeed, as I recall from my own playthrough of Persona 4, towards the mid-game, Yosuke, Chie, and Kanji were still level 20 or so at that point, mostly because of how hard Naoto was carrying the entire team up until that point. And right then and there, I almost stopped my save. Sure, I didn't know that XP scaled on the game at the time, but even knowing that now, in retrospect, I care even less for this mechanic. If XP was scaled to such a way where I could throw one of my party members into the team, survive one battle, and get the XP anyway, why not distribute the XP evenly to my team anyway? I'm not sure why this mechanic was implemented or why Atlas didn't create a way to share XP with your bench party members in Golden, but in Persona 5, Atlas created a half-assed solution to this problem that they refused to fix by tying the mechanic of sharing XP to Mishima's confidant, a confidant that you automatically establish as you progress through the game naturally. So after the first palace, the first dungeon in Persona 5, all of your party members are going to receive some modicum of XP in the background, and only allowing your bench party members to earn XP in parity with your active members once you max it out. For me, despite Atlas's arrogance in this mechanic, it was an acceptable compromise. Level up Mishima a little bit, you get his confidant, some bonus Persona XP for fusions, and a few perks here and there. However, the way that reload attacks a mechanic in the game, as a remaster Persona 3 filled with gameplay loops inspired by Persona 5 Royal, is utterly asinine due to how it revolves around random chance, to how it's then tied to other game mechanics as well. So, in order for your party members to catch up with your A team, you have to use the item called Twilight Fragments on special chests and objects within Tartarus. There are precious little of these things that are scattered throughout the overworld and throughout Tartarus as well, with Elizabeth giving you some upon completing some of her requests too. Now, when using a Twilight Fragment, it will, at random, summon this thing called the Great Clock. Once you interact with it, you're allowed to pick only 2 party members to level up to the protagonist's current level. This is great and all, but of course, due to its reliance on your expenditure of Twilight Fragments, a seemingly rare and finite item within Persona 3 Reloaded, encouraging you to open up or activate as many things you can get your hands on, there are going to be a few instances where you're going to come up short in regards to opening special chests or activating certain items with Twilight Fragments. This leaves the chances of the Great Clock itself spawning absurdly low due to the rarity of the fragments themselves. My own grievances about being only allowed to level up 2 of my party members aside, after the clock decides to spawn and after you make your selections, those party members don't automatically receive the level up. What you then have to do is go back to the entrance to Tartarus, swap out 2 of the members of your current party for the ones that you just selected for the level up through the Great Clock, and then complete a battle with those party members you currently selected to receive the level up from the Great Clock to then officially be leveled up with parity onto you. It's all so incredibly obtuse. I'm not sure why, given the variety of enemies within Tartarus, the act of giving XP to your party members to make sure they can sub for a fight in a pinch is so difficult. Why can't they make this mechanic more easy to use? Why is Atlas being so stingy with XP in Tartarus of all places? I don't understand. In retrospect, I can see why Atlas decided to distance themselves from Tartarus in concept in Persona 5 and within Persona 4 by making the TV worlds, the palaces, and mementos revolve around the characters in your party instead. Variety is the spice of life after all, and by making each new dungeon relevant to each new party member or each new villain that we fight, it keeps each dungeon more interesting. The theming and lore explanations as to why the palaces in Persona 5 appear the way they do as the product of the cognitions of insane and callous narcissists simply cannot be beaten either. Neither can the theming for a bunch of downtrodden outcast teenagers with an affinity for cosplaying, telling their oppressors to allegorically and literally go fuck themselves, be beaten either. Perhaps that's where I find P3's cast a bit hard to digest, and for that, let's get into why. Regarding Persona 3's social links and its overall writing, this is where most of the game's shortcomings occur, at least for me. Persona 3 social links manage to strike a rather strange and polarizing balance where these social links are either abysmally bad or incredibly engaging. If you're a glass half full kind of guy, then these social links won't really bother you. However, if you're glass half empty kind of guy, well, most of these social links are going to be really grating and annoying to sit through. As for me, well, it's all about the first impressions. It didn't help that we started with Tomochika. I was forced to sit through the absolute cascading train wreck of secondhand embarrassment and cringe Tomochika's link was because he was the only one of 2 social links available at the start of the game.
And hey, don't tell anyone about me and Emiri, okay? Because teachers aren't allowed to date students. I only told you because I trust you.
Tomochika, you are the dumbest kid I think I've ever witnessed in this whole entire series of games. This isn't even like the cool kind of insane. You're just a fucking idiot. With the addition of all the social links being voice acted now, this polarization effect still applies to the dialogue, as in the dud social links are still duds, but the dialogue does sort of sift around the perspective a little bit to make it a, well, sort of more well-rounded experience, if you will. The best example of this being Yuko Nishiwagi's social link going from pretty alright to outright excellent due to how her VA's performance in English dub performs. Instead of just being a block of text that I have to read and interpret myself, the way that Yuko is portrayed in Reloaded makes her feel like an incredibly authentic person and a generally cool person to hang out with.
Welcome aboard. I'm Yuko Nishiwaki. You're a second year, right? Since we're in the same grade, you can just call me Yuko. And the guys on the team all act like little kids. Where's my towel? Can you wash this for me? I'm not their mother, you know. He was all like, at this rate, you'll end up as a good-for-nothing adult. And you're not putting enough thought into your future. Come on, it's way too early to worry about the future, isn't it? We're still just teenagers.
Oh, Auntie Yuko.
How many times do I have to tell you? You can call me Big Sis, nothing else.
I will say this. Yuko was in the top 3 for my romance candidates next to Yukari and Mitsuru. That is how much these performances gave to these characters. Hearing Akinori's anguish as he withers away was outstanding.
I got really into my reading last night and never went to sleep. I thought I'd be fine since I've lost sleep from the pain and anxiety of my illness before, but I suppose I'm not doing my health any favors like this.
Hearing Chihiro quite literally in this instance, finding her voice and standing up for herself was genuinely cool.
All I have to do is clear my name, right? I can do something about it on my own. I'm going to demand an explanation from the teacher. Can you believe I went to the faculty office and said all that? I even surprised myself a bit. This whole thing is just...
As was Yukari's outrage for Makoto trying to help her, which gets even better if you decide to reverse her social link.
Did you think I needed saving? I'm not helpless, you know? I got my wallet back by myself. I didn't need your help. What's that supposed to mean? So what if I'm a girl? Am I supposed to just hide behind men all my life like my mom? Don't mock me like this. I never asked for your help. I'm fine on my own.
Hearing Junpei's scary story sequences had me giggling with how stupid and charming it was.
It's probably made up. We don't need to go into details, do we?
I don't know. People just disappearing for some shit.
You got it. Here goes. Good evening, and welcome to Junpei's Believe It or Don't.
Hearing Mitsuo's rage as she called her fiancé a Philistine was not only hilarious, but genuinely awesome.
The group will do just fine on its own. We don't need help from a weasel like you. As of today, we'll have nothing to do with each other. And if you dare to attempt some petty retaliation, then next time you'll have the full might of the group to contend with. Get out of here, you Philistine! I don't want to see your face ever again!
Holy shit, Mitsuru!
Grandpa!
Wow. Wow. What a pathetic effort. Are you kidding me? This is the guy that the group wanted Mitsuru to marry? Oh, fuck off. In case it wasn't immediately obvious, I really like how alive Reloaded's characters are now. Everyone is remarkably more animated and expressive than ever before. Characters no longer have to awkwardly walk in place to turn around the spot, but rather move more naturally, unlike in Royal or Golden. The 3D model Sakuga that was present in Persona 5 Royal no longer exists, such as Ann getting up to leave the diner at the start of the game, or when she moves to pick up the Mona bag in LeBlanc that required extensive rigging for more specialized animated sequences. Sakuga like this no longer exists in Reload. Most of all, characters are now able of ambulating around, conveying more complex facial expressions, and even trying to lip sync to the length of dialogue as well without the assistance of the bust-up portraits. There were times where I was able to almost follow along with the conversation and read the general vibe of the room just from these things alone, which is a fantastic quality of life change. With that, we could see a differentiation in focus from Atlas with its overall of how they're handling or even outright preferring 3D modeling to hiring an animation team to create a handful of animated cutscenes. To all the Zoomers out there who weren't around the early stages of 3D gaming, it was common practice to include an instruction manual within each game. More often than not, because the consoles the PS1, Xbox, and N64 were unable to deliver the true artistic vision of the game's characters and world, concept art and illustrations of said characters were included to fill in the blank space that the consoles could not for the time provide. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask were standout examples of this time and for me. But Persona 3 and 4 held on to this legacy a bit longer due to both games being PS2 games that were then ported to the PSP with Portable and Golden, which then cemented certain features of the game that stem from its limitations. These technical limitations invented Persona's reliance on its animated cutscenes and mode of bust-up portraits that communicates to you just how each character feels, along with how the game delivers dialogue to you. These are old legacy holdovers from a time where P3's graphics were comparatively garbage to its same-gen contemporaries like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker and Little Big Planet, which was helped along by the PSP's OLED display. time. Now we're witnessing another evolution in the development process here as well. For Reload, they've completely ditched some of the anime cutscenes from the original game in favor of how Persona 5 Strikers handled everything with its 3D models from the anime cutscenes being reserved for the start and the end of the game. It's a shame, as I, like most, perceive this as an objective downgrade. So much style and charm oozes from the OG animated cutscenes as opposed to the 3D rendered ones. I think everyone can agree that the way Makoto awakens to, well, Orpheus and Thanatos at the same time at the top of the dorms is way better in Fez than it is in the 3D animated cutscene that they put in Reload. This Sakuga goes incredibly hard. While the mourn the loss of these cutscenes is an undeniable evil that Alice had to confront eventually. Storyboarding and animation is not only really hard, but incredibly expensive, especially since, well, considering we're only making like 4-minute cutscenes for the game as well. Comparatively, populating a spline curve in Unreal Engine 4 for the same narrative effect is way easier and more cost-effective. My gripes about the animated cutscenes missing aside, everything else included in Reload is an objective upgrade. I sure hope that this is the type of standard that Alice sets for future entries in the Persona franchise, wherein everything is voice acted like this. It's a quality of life improvement that would do wonders for Persona 6, or as I suspect, the Persona 4 Golden Remaster that Alice is likely working on as I speak. Anyway, that aside, the content, the actual writing for the social links and the resolutions hasn't changed at all. The voice acting does complement the original material, but the duds are still duds. The Moon Arcana with the fat kid still sucks.
If people start thinking we're best friends or something, I'm gonna end up as the uncool one.
Oh my god. This is simultaneously exactly how I imagine this guy to sound, but it's also just as much worse. Odagiri is still the same abrasive moron.
They think freedom is a life without rules. It's ridiculous, plain and simple. Without rules, the whole system will collapse. They're mistaking selfishness for freedom.
Odagiri, please uninstall Reddit and Twitter from your phone, please. The entire school would appreciate this. And Tanaka is still not getting my 20,000 yen because I was still too poor from fusing personas or buying gear to prep for all the fight against Nyx, while trying to get Tartarus over and done with as quickly as possible. What makes matters worse is that apart from the Fool Arcana, you get no benefits apart from additional bonus XP for fusing personas of that particular Arcana. Of all the things they need to carry over from Persona 5 Royal for the quality of life changes to Reloaded, this is one of the things about Reload that really vexes me. If Tartarus is the backbone of Persona 3, with every other gameplay mechanic within the entirety of the game feeding right back into spelunking, then I'm not sure why this feature in Persona 5's Conflict Arcs wasn't included in Reload. If any of these social links gave me additional perks in combat, like Hifumi's ability to swap out party members while taking a turn, Kawakami's ability to stay up late to do an additional social task, or An's Confidant ability, Sexy Technique, which can be used to cancel out an attack, would make Tartarus so much more bearable to traverse. Let's be honest here, I don't think anyone in Persona 5 Royal would have put up with Shinya or even Mishima if their skills weren't worth it. Mishima is core to your party, and if you don't max it out, you'll be playing P5 with how Persona 4 handled its XP distribution to your bench party members, by literally not leveling them whatsoever. Perhaps Persona 5 has spoiled me, but nevertheless, after jumping that particular shark, additional Persona Fusion XP and sinking 10 days of in-game time to receive a brand new Persona based on that Arcana you just maxed out is no longer sufficient enough for reward if you're gonna have me slog through a bunch of boring social links and through Tartarus directly afterwards. Something that's made all the more arduous, most of the social links repeatedly stop on cliffhangers that don't get resolved for multiple parts after they appear. It also doesn't help that the solution to the personal problems that each of the lower quality and more obnoxious social links deal with are so painfully obvious. Even the most minor social links in Persona 5 had that whole angle of some big and powerful shitbag punching down on someone else that made every confidant somewhat interesting, with each character needing to find their voice once again. Of course, Persona 3 is about the acceptance of death and, well, seizing the opportunity to let go of what you fear to lose in order to grow, to make the most of your time on this earth, but I feel like that angle isn't exploited effectively enough for most of these links. With that, there are some quality of life aspects that Alice had to implement when deciding what to include from Fez and Portable. In other words, this is the part of the video where I talk about FEMC and Persona 3 Portable's content. As far as that goes, Junpei, Koromaru, Akihiko, Ken, and Shinjiro do not have any social links that are tied to a particular Arcana in Reloaded. Instead, what they have done is create social events that often net you alternative plot outcomes, the same outcome as if you max out a particular social link normally, such as a brand new persona, some bonus modifiers to your Theurgy abilities, or some bonus consumable items that you cook with your party. In Koromaru's case, because he doesn't have a social link, hang out with him 3 times and see the ability to fuse Byakuo, which, rather annoyingly, is necessary to fuse the ultimate higher fence Arcana, being Koryu. These events are on a limited timer as well, but I did not know this at the time. Thus, I ended up missing out on the ability to fuse Byakko at the end of the game, which in turn also made the time I spent with Bonkichi and Mitsuko at the bookstore totally worthless because I was missing the final piece of the puzzle to fuse their ultimate persona, Kuryu, as a reward. I cannot describe my utter disdain at this decision, wherein all these different social links often sort of chain together, but if you fuck up and don't spend time with the correct amount of people, then, well, you're not going to get the reward that you want. This is also where I get annoyed with people who claim that Persona 3 or even any Persona game is about maximizing your time with the people who you actually want to hang out with. I spent 10 days with people who are supposed to net me a more powerful persona, but in order to achieve that goal, I had to hang out with a completely different character at least 3 times throughout the game. Can someone please explain to me why that's a cool and interesting game mechanic, please? I'm genuinely curious what you have to say. Now, apart from this major annoyance with this mechanic of the game, these social events stretch out to your other party members in the dorms where you can either watch a DVD, cook food, or read a book with them to either net you a rare powerful consumable or a modification to the Theurgy abilities. Do this 3 times and these things will be unlocked. This was done as a consequence of locking Mitsuru's, Fuka's, and Yukari's social links towards the end of the game and behind certain social stat requirements. You do glean a few things about these characters, especially from those who do not belong to normal social links like Akihiko, as you do end up watching his first boxing match together, as you both reflect on the kind of growing that he has achieved throughout this whole game together, but it's nothing really substantial after the fact. This is why I think that towards the end of the game, at least for me, I didn't really feel like I knew Akihiko as much as I wanted to. Sure, there were a couple instances here and there where we hung out together, had some ramen, and beat up a bunch of dudes in front of a shrine, but still, towards the end of the game, it felt like it didn't know him as well as, say, Mitsuru, Yukari, Junpei, or really anyone else in my party. Otherwise, these little tiny social events here, where you do spend one-on-one time with your party members who don't necessarily belong to a social link, are more like little nuggets of characterization that are nice to know but not totally necessary to understand them. Such as Yukari outright stating that she's only watching these set of horror movies with us because, well, go figure, she likes strong female protagonists. Nice little bit of foreshadowing for her actual social link, but again, these are just small little details that, well, foreshadow something in the future, or really aren't hit upon at all in any kind of useful way. Speaking of missing social links and strong female protagonists, some links like Ryo for the Charitakana and Sayori for the Hermit are missing due to FEMC not being in the game. At the time of writing, we got a hard confirmation that Alice is not including a FEMC route with the game, as would be a huge financial burden to them. To which I will respond by saying the following, probably in vain. Let me be absolutely clear here. FEMC/Katone is a net positive for the replay value of a grindy dungeon crawler like Persona 3. General exclusive options, additional romance subplots, and changes in dialogue are always a good thing for any story-based RPG just because of the inherent replay value playing as a woman has. Take it from a guy whose favorite RPGs are old-school Bioware games and games similar to them. The Mass Effect trilogy will not be the same without the bromance between Broshep and Garrus.
Meet me at the bar. I'm buying.
We're a team, Garrus. There's no Shepard without Vicarian, so you better remember to duck.
Nor would it be the same without FemShep and Garrus bumping uglies. We wouldn't have the variety of different performances Mark Muir gives as Broshep or Jennifer Hale gives as FemShep. This variety gives Liara romance in Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 some variety as well. Now, I think both for political reasons and financial reasons, the rare instance where capitalist interests and some people's desire to make GNC characters, the rare instance where these things magic coalesce toward their goal of gender neutrality, go figure, characters are more player sexual than ever rather than having actual characterization through their gender and preferences. SWTOR started this trend with expansions as a way to save money on voice acting, and Baldur's Gate 3 picked this up later. It not only kills the replay value for me, but it also kinda kills some of the nuanced discussions that we can have pertaining to your particular character that you pick. It's a shame because I think if the modern industry had its way, I don't think we'd have gotten most of the ways that FEMC interacts with her party, specifically as a woman, which takes center stage as a core aspect of her character. Now, I've talked about this before on my channel during the opening parts of my video analysis on Takamaki and Makoto Nijima all the way back when. You guys are welcome to watch those videos, and I'll include a link down in the description down below. But for the sake of argument, I'll repeat those arguments and rephrase for the sake of consistency and relevancy towards what I'm talking about with this particular video in relation to FEMC. I don't think that if Persona 3 Portable was made today, we would have gotten Junpei's rejection of Katone, the special event with Shinjiro as Katone softens his heart over the course of a social link, Yukari and Katone being catty as they gossip about Junpei on the way back to the dorms, or even hearing about the boys get all macho and fight over Katone's hand. All these things make the road unique and special, but not as special as the way that Katone, on the mere basis of her gender, completely transforms Mitsuru's social link from being above average to one of the best in the entire game, where Makoto is merely just allowed to kind of nod along as he tries to understand Mitsuru's plight, as her future beyond high school is in danger of being stolen from her by her fiancé. Kotone, by the virtue of her being a woman, is able to get into the nitty-gritty as to what exactly her fiancé, this thief, is stealing from her. Mitsuru knows that in order to preserve her family's company, she has to marry and produce an heir. But once that happens, Mitsuru will not only literally lose her last name in the marriage, as well as her right as a heiress of the company, but she'll become a housewife, charged with effectively rearing the future of a company. If that is the future of Mitsuru's life, despite all the effort she's put in to appear strong, since she was literally 6 years old, to then bow the dark hour and rectify the sins of her grandfather, then what was the point of it all? Where exactly would Mitsuru fit in or be needed to stabilize the Karijo group if she has to sacrifice her future to keep it from toppling over? Ever since the advent of the Dark Hour, Mitsuru has strove to be a warrior. Anything less would be an utter betrayal to herself. The mere idea of Mitsuru, of all people, becoming a lowly housewife to the corporate merger fuckery that Japanese culture has after putting her life on the line every single month since the Dark Hour began is not only totally insane, but more importantly, it's a thought-provoking story beat, which, come to think of it, there was never really a point in Persona 3 Reload that made me stop and think about the dialogue apart from, say, Akanari's social link, and the way that they sort of changed Yukari's social link around just a little bit. Atlus changed the angle of Yukari's frustrations with Makoto helping her to be less about her despising the idea of someone pitying her, back to Yukari's own hatred of her mother's weaknesses. The way her mother sacrificed her own independence as she threw herself from boyfriend to boyfriend, both for protection and as a coping mechanism to deal with the way that her husband died.
What's that supposed to mean? So what if I'm a girl? Am I supposed to just hide behind men all my life like my mom? Don't mock me like this.
And the stakes that were laid to seize by Ryojin concerning the metaphysics of the fall. The normal route with Makoto Yuki pales in comparison to FEMC's route, and now I would like to take the opportunity to tell those, as politely as I can, those of whom still believe that Atlus, being the sexist pigs that they so obviously are, having no idea how to write women and all, to politely fuck off because you clearly have no idea what you're talking about.
Get out of here, you Philistine!
FEMC is a valuable vehicle to utilize as a means to tell a story, especially since the topic of gendered issues has become the kind of cynical discussion point in video games and within wider media, which is why I mourn for the loss of these exclusive routes and content that games like Mass Effect and Persona 3 Portable offers. On the surface, getting rid of all these routes might seem like inclusivity, but looking deeper, it's all thinly disguised corporate nonsense to save a few bucks on voice actors and to reap the benefits of positive PR. Stories that deal with patriarchy, gender, or at least touch upon it in some way, shape, or form need to exist with characters like Kotone, Mitsuru, Anza Kamaki, Haru Kumura, Risa Kujikawa, Naoto Shirogane, and the Nijima sisters in Persona 5 being the vehicles that deliver that kind of experience are absolutely necessary to exist, and I mourn for every second that we don't see Kotone's story within Persona 3 Reload. I fear that in the current climate, games and stories that deal with the realities and facets of being a woman are kind of going to fall off into obscurity here. Too many female characters are falling victim to hacks who favor more misanthropic, cynical, and ideological takes on characters, and story beats that deal with most of the same themes. If FEMC's route is anything to go by here, all we need to do in order to tell a good story is, well, likable characters who have a small but meaningful conversation between themselves as friends, and not sweepingly cynical ideological storytelling where the same thematic idea is hammered relentlessly and cynically into your brain. This, above all else, is why I think FEMC holds such a special place in the hearts of those who have played a route in Persona 3 Portable. When taking a quick look at the OSC that's exclusive to a route, Kotone seems to have a chip on her shoulder compared to Yuki's stoic demeanor. She has something to prove, especially in relation to her gender. She seemingly doesn't like being discounted on the basis of her gender or physical abilities. She is a capable badass, and she does know it.
A lot of anger in it. Hell now, no man can run away.
Also, just objectively speaking here, wiping all out is a superior track to Mass Destruction. Cue the chorus!
Demolition. Wiping all out.
Wipe out.
I want gold until it's over. It's coalition.
But not as good as it's going down now. Disturbing the peace. Look into I can't express the ire that I feel towards Atlus for her route not being in the cards for any kind of expansion, as Atlus is also charging 105 USD for the quote-unquote full Persona 3 experience, plus the extra 30-odd hours that the answer is going to add in a couple months. It is an absolutely abysmally stupid and greedy decision. But Badger games cost money to make, yes, I am aware. This doesn't change the fact that this roadmap for Reload's DLC is the most offensive thing that I've seen outside of some battle passes for some of the games that, well, utilize the live service revenue model. This is a fully priced $70 remaster of a 17-year-old JRPG that lacks some standout features from Persona 5 Royal. I cannot quite see why this model is necessary for such a caliber of a game, other than for pure greed. Regardless, we have to deal with the absence of the more cerebral narrative questions FEMC asks the players to consider, which will be the case for the rest of the video too. While some of the content with Shinjiro and Aki are kept within Reload, personally, I still think that Shinjiro, Ken, and Aki are the most weakly written members of SEES in terms of the narrative power that they wield. Concerning Aki, Mitsuru, and Shinjiro being the original members of SEES and all, being outclassed in every turn in the opening members of the organization as a struggle against inevitability itself, I understand what they were going for there. However, I feel like that information needs to be revealed before it does in Reload to contextualize just how hard they've been fighting the Dark Hour for all these years. I found it hard to connect to them all on an emotional level because we're not there to tag along with them as they get hard stuck in the first block of Tartarus for, well, up to 3 years until, well, Makoto Yuki comes into their lives.
The three of us teaming up again certainly brings back memories.
Tell me about it. Those days, we just kept fighting and fighting day after day.
All I remember is Aki getting too worked up and rushing into danger on his own.
That sounds about right.
We're merely witnessing the fallout of a tragedy between 3 friends, with the game choosing to withhold that information from us for actual ages, while my interest in that drama has quickly dried up. Shinjiro, Mitsuru, and Aki are supposed to be the wisest, most senior, and most experienced members of SEES, and while they certainly do give off that energy, especially with Mitsuru, I still feel like I needed more context rather than seeing the fallout that stemmed from Shinji losing control of his persona. For Akihiko and Shinjiro, this is where the game's issues with cliffhangers and how the plot really likes to drag its feet on these things really starts to get obnoxious for a few different reasons. For one, this relationship Aki and Shinjiro have just kind of comes out of nowhere, with the game expecting us to play along with these two who obviously have a history together, but not directly explaining to us why they've grown apart throughout multiple cutaway sequences, until Aki might as well be staring into the camera as he explains that he is an orphan who wants to do right by his deceased sister. Then Ken and everyone else shows up, Takaya shows up, says society bottom text, and Shinjiro dies around the 30-hour mark as the game's theming finally kicks in. That is to say, after 30 hours, and as a result of Shinjiro's death, Persona 3 finally starts to become a lot more tolerable. That being said, because of the delays on all these different plot events, I found it hard to get myself to care or mourn over Shinjiro's death and his connection to Ken, Aki, and Mitsuru. Watching his death unfold, the kind of empathy I was feeling at the time was trying to blatantly support and comfort a friend who suffered through a dismal tragedy. We never got to know Shinjiro personally like Aki and Mitsuru did, which again is just a result of trying to keep Shinjiro interesting and mysterious. Characterizing him as so was a total waste of time and hamstrings this point of the story as one of the many climaxes of the game. While I can appreciate the slow burn as the rest of SEES begins to transform from co-workers to friends, comparatively speaking, the chemistry Ryuji and An have within Persona 5 make them instantly likable as the devil and angel roles they played to Joker. Needless to say, I was super upset when Ryuji's dizzy death happened after all that growth he undertook throughout the game, and I was right there with An as the bestest boy seemingly perished before her eyes after saving everyone's life. 30 hours in, and I felt particularly nothing that pulled on my heartstrings in a similar way to Shinji's death. This wouldn't happen until later when Mitsuru's dad perished, and I was swiftly reminded that Mitsuru, despite her persona literally just being the queen of the Amazons, and despite Mitsuru being an extremely capable young girl and a warrior at that, is still an extremely fallible young high school girl.
My father once made a promise. He swore he would atone for putting our generation in danger even if it cost him his life. But I wanted him to live. I became a Persona user so I could protect him.
Up until this point, we didn't even see Mitsuru so much as sweat, but now she's on the floor collapsed and bawling her eyes out, with the game specifically pointing out that Mitsuru is crying like a child. It's such a poignant moment for the plot. Mitsuru for once shows some actual fallibility and vulnerability as her character starts to get slowly peeled back. We see how much being a Persona user means to her, as well as how much it means for her to stop the Dark Hour because, well, she's a Karijo. She feels partly responsible for everything that's going on, in a sins of the father kind of deal. This was one of a handful of moments in the game that really had me to sort of stop and think about everything that's going on, with the other being, well, the situation with Chidori and Junpei. Back on track here though. For reference, 30 hours into Persona 5 is likely about when you see Makoto awaken to her persona in Kanashiro's palace, which of course had me and many others so hyped to see what would come next for a new badass biker chick in Persona 5. Easily the high point of the game, that arguably Makoto everyone's favorite as well. The manner in which the conflict arcs are structured in Persona 5 as well, compared to how the social links are structured in Persona 3 Reload, also made it difficult for me to sort of latch onto these characters as well. In Persona 5, as soon as I showed up to Tokyo as Joker, I immediately latched on to Ryujin and On. They were instantly likable to me and became one of my favorite characters in the entire game from start to finish. Comparatively speaking to Persona 3, Persona 5 captures our interest by setting the stakes extraordinarily high by starting with the outrage Kamoshida invokes within the audience, with the game taking that outrage higher and higher to keep us interested. I'm going to play my reaction to, well, the first tragic incident that occurs at the start of the game during the opening parts of the Kamoshida arc. If you for whatever reason have not played Persona 5 and you're still watching, please stop the video now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god! Oh, dude, what the hell?
We need someone to go with her. Are there any teachers around?
I'm not in charge of her class, though.
Oh, fuck you spineless prick.
We should leave this to Principal Kobayakawa.
Are you fucking kidding me? No one here has a spine. The game's made it pretty clear so far, but I guess the amount of control Kamoshida has inflicted upon everyone in the school, to the point where they're afraid of riding in an ambulance when their students attempted suicide by jumping off their fucking building.
She didn't make any mistakes or anything. Mr. Kamoshida seemed really irritated that day. He didn't.
Wait.
That son of a bitch!
There's no way he did that to Shiho.
Ryuji's on a fucking mission and I'm so invested. Let's fucking go.
In Persona 3, we're having mediocre boss fights with shadows representative of abstract concepts of a tarot card deck. We deal with these shadows at least once a month every full moon, and also dealing with Strega. Apart from the Lover's Arcana fight in the level Tau and the Priestess Arcana fight in the train, these bosses, while possessing unique game mechanics, don't necessarily make them interesting. Could you imagine if all the party's confidant arcs became available after Ryuji or Akechi's deaths instead of immediately after the start of their arcs by awakening to the personas and joining our party? It wouldn't work. Well, yes, obviously it wouldn't work, because that is not how Persona 5 is supposed to function, but goddamn, the way Persona 3 has me wait all this time, to wait until Shinjiro's death to be the catalyst for the party to begin to reevaluate why they fight, or as the game forces me to wait even longer to find out more about Yukari, Fuka, Junpei, and Mitsuru is insane. Instead of being like Persona 5, instead of waiting until all the Phantom Thieves are on the party like Persona 3 does with C's, each character gets their own time to shine as their dedicated part of the game, with the confronts unlocking shortly thereafter. The pacing of this game is literally uneven, and it doesn't help that their social links are unlocked at literally the last 2 months of the game. Not me ignoring literally every single other confidant in the month of November just to get Mitsuru's social link done faster. So that begs the question. How is Persona 3 when its gears are properly greased and the story is chugging along? Well, it's better, but there's still some problems pacing and with who exactly the game decides to focus on. Mainly, my problem lies with the backstory behind Strega, as well as their motivations, along with how Yukari's character growth practically makes her the primary or even the secondary protagonist of Persona 3. Let's start with the latter and work our way around to talking about Strega after, cause ugh. Ladies and gentlemen, after reviewing my footage and looking through all my different playthroughs and all my different saves, and through my own recollections as well, I feel like Persona 3 Reloaded is a piece of pro-Yukari Takeba propaganda, hand-tailored by Alice in an effort to hedge their bets when her character is dragged through the mud online, and taking enough context for agreeing the list of guys she clearly left to pieces in the answer. Yukari has the most screen time and cutscenes and dialogue, along with the most personal character growth that we actually have the privilege of seeing unfold firsthand, contrary to the rest of C's. This is great and makes Yukari a well-rounded character, but it's at the cost of the screen time of all the other members of C's as well. My main criticism here is that Yukari suffers from what I have previously referred to in some of my previous analog videos as the Basilisk Sean effect. A long time ago, in a galaxy not so far away, I made a video where I took an in-depth analytical look at Culture 1's Basilisk Sean, where I made the claim that up until the climax of the game, Basilisk Sean is arguably the protagonist of the game. Up until that point, Basilisk is the one making all the major decisions, and is the one guiding us to the Starforge maps within KOTOR. During our adventure, she is the sole character that experiences the most amount of growth from when you first meet her to when the game concludes. She spends most of the game suffering from imposter syndrome, dealing with her rather rocky relationship with her parents, her own moral code against that of the Jedis, and is charged with keeping an incredible secret. Most importantly, she deals with possibly making the most consequential decision, or rather mistake, depending on how you look at it, that any Jedi will ever make in Star Wars canon, up until Darth Vader nearly annihilates the whole Jedi Order 2,000 years later. Yukari is much the same way, and is characterized as such within Persona 3. The first time we meet her, we see her struggling to summon the courage to use her evoker as the Dark Hour falls around Iwadotai dorms. She fails to do so, causing causing us to step in, which then causes Yukari herself to do everything that she can as to not appear weak or helpless, as she then attempts to uncover the truth behind her father's actions and the shadows.
Everyone's always protecting me. I'm getting hurt because of it.
This emotional turmoil causes her to be the first to use her Theurgy to save her life, which then gets built upon as she develops a cynical hatred and suspicion of Mitsuru, while lashing out at us in a very believable and human way for what she believes is pity.
Did you really think I could just be cheered up so easily? You think you know me? You don't know anything.
She believes herself at her very core to be a horrible person. She's so taken by her own insecurities as she feels so lost and confused all the time. However, that's what makes Yukari's character so interesting. The interesting thing here about Yukari's character is that, well, she is aware of this. The thing is, Yukari is aware of this. At her core, Yukari believes that she doesn't deserve to be happy or content because, well, everything has gone wrong for her in her life thus far. Even throughout all of her social link parts, you get this feeling that she's constantly putting herself down. Even at rank 9, she was afraid of being perceived as a neurotic and jealous girl for entertaining the idea that Protect-kun was hanging out with Fuka, or that we both had a thing for each other. When we tell her otherwise, now that something has managed to go right for her, in bagging the dude that she's so obviously jealous of and infatuated with, Yukari for the first time in her life can feel some amount of closure about something, hence the mention of a massive weight being lifted off her shoulders. This kind of weight isn't given to any other characters in the game other than maybe Junpei, because the arcs of Mitsuru, Aki, Ken, and Shinjiro already started the third acts as it were, because, well, we don't see them spelunking through the first few levels of Tartarus as they were first years in, well, Gekukan High. Conversely, for Yukari, we see a whole story play out, and one that's not entirely finished until the answer is complete. I'll report back on how Reload handles her with the answer, but for now, Yukari's presence in the game still doesn't sit right for me for all the reasons that I previously mentioned. Speaking of things that don't entirely sit right with me, let's talk about Persona 3's counterpart to C's, Strega, but more specifically, Takaya and Jin. To clarify here, Chidori as a character is cool as fuck and shows her growth alongside Junpei. Enough said, no need to elaborate further. That being said, bar none, into my current recollection of all the games I've recently played, Strega are the most boring, outright paint-by-number, society-bottom text antagonists that I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through within a video game. You know, I wanted to try and find the true culprit in Persona 4 and do so in earnest, and after doing so, I wanted to rip Adachi's eyes out. Same with almost all the antagonists and palace rulers in Persona 5, apart from maybe Akechi and Maruki. But every time Takaya and Jin open their mouths to speak, I'm gonna rip my own eyes out in an effort to get them to shut up. It's even more frustrating because this dude speaks in tongues and is never clear with what exactly he's trying to say, which only makes it more annoying when he's the one that goes around indiscriminately murdering those close to C's. These deaths do not feel like organic story beats and more like plot devices need to kick the story into gear. Takaya causing Shinji's death didn't feel like it was earned when juxtaposed to Chidori or Junpei's. Mostly because, well, Chidori or even Junpei's death is less about Takaya's ideology versus that of C's, and more about the personal growth between Chidori or even Junpei. Something that we see with our own two eyes. Junpei and Chidori proving that Takaya's ideology is stupid and pointless and worthless is a secondary facet of this whole situation. I can say nothing of the same between Ken and Shinjiro's beef. Events that occurred way before the game even started, and, well, we're seeing the results of the fallout now. Seriously, in most of these instances, you could just replace Takaya with a shadow fatally wounding someone, or fuck it, let's just have someone make a mod that replaces Takaya's motto with a sentient gun, and you achieve the same narrative beats for Shinji's, Junpei, and Chidori's deaths. Strega are so aggressively unserious, and Takaya's stupid car versus convenience analogy might be the most absurd thing I've heard in the series thus far, beating out the instance of Persona 5 where Sojiro says, "I think I might die," or the inane flashbacks used to ensure that the audience understands that yes, Makoto Nijima feels pretty useless right now.
My coat is invisible to fools.
What the fuck?
But of course I'm joking.
Who is this guy?
You would rather ask about me.
Yeah.
Damn.
Stay right there and think about what you've done.
Fine, sit there and pout. Are you fucking serious? Oh, he seems to be unconscious, guys. I honestly don't understand if I'm supposed to laugh at Takaya's megalomania or try to take him and Jin seriously, but there's a bigger problem with Strega that I think we need to touch base with first. Now that Persona 3 has like, what, 2 to 3 other versions of Persona 3, 2 to 3 other chances where they could rectify the narrative shortcomings of Strega and what they represent to the overall themes of the game, now I think we could just call them a wasted opportunity. The villains and thematic elements that they could have been, and And maybe, just perhaps, if they were done correctly, Takaya and Jin could have been a par with Akechi's portrayal in Persona 5 Royal. I mean, they certainly tried to set up that narrative parallel between Yuki and Takaya, as was the case with Joker and Akechi in Persona 5 with that fight in Moonlight Bridge, but of course, this doesn't work because we have no fucking clue who and what Takaya is or what Strega's motivations are.
How do you intend to partake? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, is it? Sound reasoning.
Akechi at least has the courtesy of having a mental breakdown before explaining his motivations. Not only that, but this makes Mako look like a giant idiot for not killing Takaya on the spot because of what he does to Shinjiro, Chidori, and Junpei later in the game. Never you mind that though. I think, at least for me, Takaya comes off as a weak antagonist, not only because, well, he's written poorly with the whole society bottom thing that Akechi and Adachi are way better at, but because he's so vehemently opposed to the game's themes that he and the rest of Strega stick out like sore thumbs.
My father was wrong. Death as deliverance is an ideology no one should ever embrace.
Okay, Kirijo-san, that was a great delivery, but I need you to look into the camera lens just a little bit harder this time, okay?
Death as deliverance is an ideology no one should ever embrace.
The game really lays it on thick sometimes and doesn't really give Takaya and Jin's ideology the light of day apart from, well, vague soothsaying, which does get really obnoxious after a while. And this is why Takaya sticks out so much. While death might close all as far as Takaya and Jin are concerned, Seize understands that there might be some work of noble note that may yet be done. But the latter part with Strega isn't really expanded upon or given too much detail until the very end of the game. As is the case for most of the game as well, the game does not know when to deliver information and exposition at appropriate times, hence why I think the payoff for Strega's motivations come off far too little and far too late as Nyx looms over the world before the fall, as Seize, well, does battle with them, scaling the last couple floors of Tartarus. With that being said, here's my understanding of this whole thing. As we eventually do come around to exposit, Takaya wants to bring about the death of humanity, seeing the coming of Nyx's salvation because he and the rest of Strega are slowly withering away anyway to a premature death. This is why he claims that he is not afraid of dying, and why he and Jin are, well, trying to expedite the process for all of humanity, so to speak. The whole practice is that, well, everyone's gonna die anyway, so why not just kill everyone now? Yeah, even saying that out loud sounds weird. Like, seriously? Oh yeah, the cancer patient is gonna die in 3 weeks, but kill everyone in the room. You take them down with you. Are you serious, bud? In the same breath, he says that the Kirijo group experimented on Chidori, Jin, and himself as orphan children in order to create a force to fight the shadows. Strega were the only ones who survived these experiments. Now, this on its own is an incredibly interesting concept, but again, it's delivered and explained far too late.
We only really knew his name. He was just one of the researchers who created us.
He created you?
Who exactly are you?
What's the point in telling you?
I want to know what the Kirijo group was doing with these kids and their evokers and their personas. Why are we being vague about this? This is like legitimately interesting. The explanations for why Jin, Chidori, Takaya, and perhaps Shinjiro subscribe to this ideology, along with how Mitsuru and the Kirijo group might be implicated or even shoulder the blame for not just causing the Dark Hour, but for many more pedicide-filled atrocities, is never really brought up again, because we're doing so at the 11th hour. This, along with Itsuki bringing up the fact, in some random-ass dialogue in Iwadotai dorms, mind you, that Mitsuru also underwent the same experimentation when she was little, sets up a narrative parallel between herself and the members of Strega that it's never really followed through with. You can make an entire game based around these concepts and story beats. How Mitsuru awakened in Princess Leia, her own persona, and the creation of Seize being the result of ruthless experimentation by her family's company and her grandfather, to which Mitsuru has always felt a strong obligation ever since she was a child to rectify the sins of her family as its heiress. Takaya's explanation begs us to find out more about this parallel she shares with Takaya. Mitsuru herself might be a beneficiary of all the pain and suffering Takaya, Jin, and Chidori has had to endure as part of the experiments her grandfather enacted upon them. That would make for a really interesting story beat, but the way we sort of close that loop is Takaya calling Mitsuru and everyone else bigots. It's super weird.
So a Kirijo, responsible for robbing us of our future, would dare to speak of our limit. Then again, I should have known better. This is just the kind of bigotry I would expect from the ones who labeled me a failure.
If you ask me, I don't think Atlus really wanted to answer these questions, but felt it necessary for whatever reason to bring them up in the plot anyway, as a way to sort of explain away Takaya and Jin's condition and why they're trying to bring about the end of humanity through reviving Nyx and then just killing everyone. Again, their motivations don't really make a whole lot of sense, even in context, and when they were actually explained as Nyx is about to end everyone. Why? It is weird that the game brings up all these neat concepts and lore about personas going berserk, with some possessing the ability to kill their wielder, persona suppressant drugs that will severely limit the lifespan of those who take them, prototype evokers, and many other things that are infinitely more interesting than what the game spends time on. Whereas all the lore and intrigue concerning the Kirijo group, who, well, as we know, is kind of responsible for the Dark Hour in the first place. There's so many missed opportunities here that the game fails to capitalize upon, and it's honestly infuriating. The theme here is once again bad pacing, but that's all I have to say about Reload's story. So, speaking of the 11th hour, let's get in the gameplay section by working backwards from Nyx.
Yes, the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed.
Nyx said the thing! The Arcana is the means by which all is revealed! This is where the downgrades for Persona 3 Reload compared to more recent mechanics featured in Persona 5 Royal begin to wax and wane in efficacy. For that one dude who's inevitably gonna go, wah, but this is a remaster of Persona 3 and the goal is to remaster that experience, wah, I would say, okay, Mr. Strawman, have you considered why they've taken the baton pass mechanic and made modifications to short-time attack mechanic Atlas added to Royal with the Theurgy attacks? These were all quality of life improvements to vanilla Persona 5, and I think it's a concept that's going to change and evolve as we move forward to Persona 6, and again, maybe we'll see this concept unfold in a possible remaster of Persona 4 Golden as well. We'll talk about the Theurgy attacks in a minute, but now let's just continue working backwards from Nyx. Let's get one thing out of the way first about my own personal experiences and how these effects that I mentioned previously changed the game. As I was preparing to fight Nyx, I remember feeling super nervous about the fight. Alright, Fuka. How are you not set up yet, Fuka? Fuka, please, for the love of God! Part of this was about how Theurgy was hopping up Nyx as the literal embodiment of the concept of death as an unavoidable, inevitable, and unbeatable adversary, with the other being some of the clips that I've seen of Nyx being absurdly difficult, with Nyx's penchant for using charm to get Yukari to cast Diarahan to completely heal Nyx. This is what makes Nyx's reputation in Persona 3 so infamous, but in Reload, her arduous lethality was nerfed somewhat to the point where I think I had more difficulty with some of the mini-bosses in the game than I did with Nyx. To be clear, I did not fight the Reaper, nor did I complete all the requests to fight Elizabeth, because I figured that if you do manage to beat the Reaper, you will end up completely overleveled for the fight with Nyx. Needless to say, I wanted a bit of a challenge. So, feeling sorely underprepared, I climbed to the top of Tartarus to level 85 or so, and honestly, the fight was a total cakewalk. The infamous yet standard Nyx experience that's normal in Fez and within Portable didn't happen on my playthrough of Reload for I think at least 3 or 4 reasons. Firstly, as best I can tell, Persona 3 Reload doesn't allow for more than 3 of your party members to be affected by status ailments, giving you space to recover between her attacks. Secondly, I suspect that Nyx is programmed not to attack the player with certain instances so that they also may recover. Thirdly, with the new social links that Reload adds to the game, as well as the restructuring of Tartarus, it makes recovery items all the more easier to obtain and to use in pinch. Spend a night in the dorms with any of your teammates cooking something, and well, you'll end up with a powerful HP restorative item. Lastly, because of the changes of how combat functions, we'll be able to take direct control of your party members, along with the addition of the Theurgy mechanics added to the game, it essentially turns this fight into a DPS race rather than something a bit more strategic and cerebral, like the fight with Madarame, Okumura, Yaldabaoth, and Marcus fight in Persona 5, with the different affinities and reliance on the baton pass mechanics. In fact, of those I just listed, Nyx was probably the easiest Persona boss fight I've ever played. I never struggled with Nyx in the same way that I did with Yaldabaoth or Maruki, or even Okumura or, well, Madarame in Persona 5. In the original version of Persona 3, some people got a thrill off watching the AI do exactly what they predicted them to do in that specific moment, as the developers intended. And to that I say, well, good for them.
That's it. No, I'm enraged, bro. That's it. This rage. Oh my god, bro! Holy shit! What the hell? I'm gonna fail! Are you seriously going to shit all over my pants? That's fine.
Providing backup.
Yes! Okay, Akihiko, please.
Let me try that.
Just murder.
Yukari-chan is unconscious.
All shall perish.
This was an excellent stream, but it had been absolute hell to play. Giving direct orders to the rest of your party was the best quality of life change the Persona franchise has ever experienced, and everyone else, including the devs, can die mad about it. I do not care if this harms their creative vision. This is Persona 3, not XCOM. Having Nyx on the ropes only have your time wasted to your party's AI scripting, making a massive tactical blunder that ends up with Nyx wiping your entire party, is bad game design and needs to be removed like the cancer was from the original game and from Fez.
No!
Wake the fuck up!
No!
Wake the fuck up!
Overdo it.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Holy Holy shit, that was way too close.
Though I wish this fight was a bit more dynamic, there is something so immensely satisfying about meeting Nyx into the dirt faster than she can say the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed. Oh! Good lord! This thing that is a literal embodiment of the inevitability of death itself getting taken upon by attack after attack. Theurgy special after Theurgy special by a group of teenagers, a dog, and a robot who absolutely refuse to give up in the face of utter oblivion is a feeling of thematic catharsis that I cannot even begin to describe. So we'll put a pin in that and talk about that in a little bit. Speaking of fun things, let's talk about the biggest quality of life changes to Reload and the parts where Alice failed to take hints from Persona 5 Royal's mechanics to make combat a more smoother experience and to make Tartarus a bit more tolerable as well. I know this might be a shocker to some of you still listening, but Persona 3 is in fact a Persona game. On the extra most bestest top tier analysis here from Bagel Knight. Like, comment, subscribe. The whole point of the combat in these sorts of games is to locate your opponent's weaknesses as quickly as you can and then exploit them. Your reward for doing this in Persona 3 and in Persona 4 was an all-out attack, which Reload still retains, but takes more hints from the evolutions Persona 5 Royal had in the core of the combat with its additions of the baton pass and showtime attack mechanics. Though I do want to spend most of my time discussing the evolution of this process between 3, 4, and Royal, I have to give a quick shout out to the biggest quality of life change Atlas has implemented in Reload thus far. Oh, we can crit her too! Yes! Yes! Thank you, Atlas. We can do critical damage to bosses. Outstanding. Finally, physical and crit builds are viable in a Persona game. Eat your heart out, Yoshizawa. Holy shit, I guess. Anyway, back on topic. The baton pass mechanic and the randomness of the showtime attack mechanic was designed to make combat more explosive and engaging, especially with the latter. These additions to Persona 5 Royal were all quality of life changes that were for the best over vanilla Persona 5, especially with how Atlas restructured the baton pass mechanic to be something that all of your party members have inherently in Royal, rather than having to wait until rank 2 of the Confidant arcs to unlock it. All party members can use shift after a certain date, but the shift mechanic is only similar to the baton pass mechanic seen in Royal, by its simple structure rather than how it's used and applied from Royal to Reload. Upon hitting a weakness or landing a crit in Reload, you can use shift to give another ally a turn for a small 1.5 times damage boost and a small charge to your Theurgy gauge. Unlike in Royal, the damage buffs do not stack after successful targeting or weaknesses or crits, which I do think is a huge downgrade. Sure, there's an argument to be made that baton passing posed a balancing issue in Royal, but let's not pretend it wasn't satisfying to plan out your string of attacks and to utterly annihilate your core with a bunch of flawlessly executed attack patterns to then see big numbers go boom. This is what made Madarame and Maruki's fight so fun and interesting for me, and Okuruma's fight really challenging, but that tactical depth of stacking damage is now gone in favor of directing everything towards filling your Theurgy gauge as quickly as possible. Don't get me wrong though, Theurgy abilities are a natural and extremely organic evolution of both the tactical elements of Persona's combat and of the showtime attacks introduced in Royal. The parameters for unlocking and initiating a showtime attack were always a little weird for me because first, you have to wait until a specific date where only highly specific members of the party were able to use a specific version of their showtime attack, wherein this specific showtime attack would literally only be triggered by a myriad of random circumstances. The parameters for proccing a showtime attack operates on a sort of push-pull basis, where one of your teammates will initiate it to either press the advantage when everyone is in danger of dying, or otherwise. Reload completely eliminates the randomness and adds some tactical depth to the combat, as we now can actually control when these special attacks occur, rather than being arbitrarily and randomly controlled by a set of circumstances within combat. Theurgy attacks are arguably one of my favorite changes to the original versions of Persona 3. It adds a layer of tactical complexity to the game when considering party composition, rather than just considering which attack types each member is weak or strong against. All the Theurgy attacks ignoring certain damage type resistances arguably makes all playstyles and party compositions valid, so long as you make a point to fulfill the requirements to max out the gauge. What I absolutely love about this tactical complexity is how the protagonist Theurgy gauge is filled, and how it seemingly encourages you to swap between your various personas to charge the gauge. This encourages some diversity in your loadout for spelunking through Tartarus, or at least, ideally this was the intention. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize for being a gamer, and like most gamers, we tend to find the most easiest ways to optimize the fun out of everything as fast as possible, especially the backbone of Persona 3 is a 264 dungeon that gets randomized every time I leave and come back at a different point in the game. For me, this meant that after discovering that critical hits work on all kinds of enemies, including bosses like Nyx and Strega, I quickly worked to create a persona that specialized in dealing as much physical damage as possible and using Yukari as a healing battery to heal my HP after maximizing said physical damage. This was also the case for whom I select to be my A team for the party that we used to challenge Nyx. I ended up just trying to find methods to BTFO every enemy and move on to the next floor of Tartarus as quickly as I could. Because again, I think this place is unbearable. Mitsuru, please! You have to kill it this turn! You have to kill it this turn! Yes! This was also the case for each member's Theurgy abilities as well. So long as it was reliable, easy to charge, allowed for sustained damage and healing, they quickly became a permanent member of my party. Now onto the topic of specific Theurgies of our party members. Some of these requirements are absurdly easy to fill, such as Aigus's, who I think, next to Yukari, has the most useful and easy to fill Theurgy games in the game. To fill Aigus's gauge, all you have to do is use any kind of physical attack skill, which isn't hard because that's all Aigus possesses. She doesn't have any kind of magical attack skills that eat her SP meter apart from Rakukaja and Marukaja. This then feeds into her Geo mode, changing it from a pretty useless porta command in Fez and Portable to something a bit more substantial in Reload. In the remastered version of the game, Aigus will enter into this mode with a giant slash damage base move, but will be unavailable to be commanded for a few turns. She will still be able to attack, but will use moves of her own free will. While that might sound a bit annoying, it actually works out because, as best I can tell, Aigus doesn't take the HP penalty for using her physical attacks while Orgeo mode is active. I also think that this makes her immune to being knocked over by critical strikes as well, which, regardless if that is true or not, the ease at which her Theurgy gauge charges made her a permanent member for me in my party. And speaking of that, let's talk about everyone's favorite healing battery, Yukari Takeba. With Yukari herself being positioned with the party as such, Al decided that this was a sole role she was fulfilled, and in doing so, made her the most useful party member of the game, bar none. Yukari's Theurgy gaze fills whenever she heals as an ally, and I cannot be sure, but the amount to which her Theurgy gaze fills also seems to be based on how much she heals someone for. In practice, all this SP she uses, of which the total cost is then reduced by 25% after locking her healing apex characteristic by spending time with her at the dorms, is effectively cashed in for a free 1 base damage nuke that ignores all resistances with Cyclone Arrow, or a free party-wide concentrate charge with a Tranquility ability to boost everyone's magical damage power. This transaction of SP into healing skills, then into straight damage or a strong attack buff is super powerful, especially if we consider that the massive damage outputs of all Theurgy skills can also be amplified by damage buffs like concentrate, charge, and elemental weaknesses if you really need something dead. Holy shit! There are some that are less useful and easy to charge, like Mitsuru's or Junpei's, which are literally based on random chance as well. On the topic of Mitsuru's gauge, it requires her to inflict a status ailment or a debuff on an enemy, which presents us with a problem to her potential uses as a party member, as you cannot use Marin Karn on bosses, for example, to charge it faster. As such, you're only limited to freezing enemies, which I've only seen happen a handful of times in my playthrough, even with all the freeze buffs that I could give her with equipment and the stagnant air ability. Nevertheless, her meter always seemed charged, and as for the reasons why, we'll get back to that in a minute. But for now, what I did is that I ended up building her to maximize her magical damage with Diamond Dust and Concentrate. God damn. For Junpei, it's all about the critical hits to fill the gauge, but unlike Mitsuru, this can be offset with skills and abilities like Rebellion. Junpei's initial Theurgy is okay, but his second one after he awakens to his second persona is incredible for a physical attacker, as it deals a massive amount of fire damage while ignoring resistances, and gives Junpei a full heal when the onslaught is complete. The latter is incredible for physical attackers like Junpei, which, because this is a Persona game, physical attacks require HP to use. Effectively, you just have to bash your head against an enemy until Junpei gets a crit, and then you effectively get a refund for all of your efforts. Now, as for the weakest ones here, they have some weird requirements to make each other character less desirable for who I ended up using to fight Nyx at the end of the game. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining the ins and outs of these particular Theurgies because, well, we have a new problem on the horizon that's more prevalent with Akihiko, Mitsuru, and with the protagonist Theurgies as well. For Akihiko, his Theurgy is by no means terrible, but it suffers from the worst kind of ailment: bad localization of flavor text. Of course, all the credit for this discovery goes to Meowcat on the Game Banana forum, who also created a mod for the PC port of Persona 3 Reloaded that rectifies these various issues with the flavor text for the Theurgy descriptions within the game. Go check their mods out on Game Banana and install this one if you feel so inclined. So, with that being said, upon your first look at this description for Akihiko's Theurgy abilities, you would think that in order to make the best uses of Akihiko's Theurgy, you would need to play him rather selfishly, as it calls for you to constantly cast buffs on Akihiko, and only Akihiko. Of course, you can't maximize this very well because you cannot stack Marukaja on top of another Marukaja, and otherwise for the same effect, without waiting 3 or more turns for the buff to completely wear out. In essence, you have to wait every few turns to use a buff on him to charge the gauge. You would think that the best way to mitigate this would be to use a skill that buffs Aki and the rest of the party, but due to said poor localization, this ability has the outward appearance of being bugged. What you actually need to do in order to charge Aki's Theurgy gauge is to ensure that he has an active buff on him at the start of his turn. In other words, the charging of his Theurgy gauge isn't dependent on the usage of a buff of himself or the expenditure of SP, but rather the uptime of certain buffs on him, which would make sense given the characteristic charge you get to his Theurgy gauge when hanging out with him in the dorms, which makes all the buffs he has more powerful and increases the uptime of said buffs. With just the change of the flavor text alone, Aki might be one of the best attackers to his Theurgy gauge functions if, and only if, it is at all possible to even stack the deck in Aki's favor by giving him equipment that gives him buffs before battle even starts. Shedding more light on this poor localization job, Mitsuru also suffers from the same problems that Aki's Theurgy does. Again, as I stated previously, Mitsuru's Theurgy seems to be centered around inflicting status ailments upon enemies, which in my mind, make confusing and freezing them, but not to the people who wrote this flavored text. In actuality, Mitsuru's Theurgy gauge charges faster not only when confusing or freezing an enemy, but also is charged when an enemy is afflicted with any debuffs such as Maturanda, Marukunda, and Masukunda at the start of Mitsuru's turn. I have no idea if Ice Break or any other elemental break works for this, but when I was fighting Nyx and using Ice Break on her, Mitsuru's gauge seemed constantly filled. If anyone out there wants to verify this information for me, contact me on my Twitter or post a comment down below and I'll give you a shout out or pin the comment. Now, regardless, this mistranslation paints her second Theurgy, Blade of Execution, in a whole new light, as it turns Mitsuru into an outstanding damage dealer and offensive debuffer. Blade of Execution is an almighty damage type, so there's no benefits for hitting weaknesses, but in the process, it also casts Debilitate on a single target as well, which runs for 3 turns, and again, that's 3 turns where Mitsuru's Theurgy gauge gets charged once again. The whole thing feeds into itself, and it's why Mitsuru was at my side fighting Nyx before I burned my bread. Speaking of getting burned, the protagonist Theurgy's characteristic is also misleading as well. Apologies for spreading false information earlier, but I feel like you'll need to understand where I was coming from before the truth of the matter. Originally, I was applauding Atlas for encouraging me to, well, build a roster of well-rounded personas, rather than creating a jack-of-all-trades persona that could slaughter anything it encountered. In reality, the gauge fills whenever you use your persona to attack, which is all the time. That rule of tactical complexity is now gone, and with it, I also morph for the dynamic persona trait mechanics of portable and reload. In Royal and within Portable, Atlas decided to implement a trait system a la Gen 3 Pokemon, a passive effect or skill that can be passed forward in the fusion process between personas. In Portable, you weren't allowed to manually select which trait you wanted your fancy new persona to inherit, but that, among other things, was rectified in Royal. To be clear, the other party members already have traits that augment their own persona abilities that are inexorably tied to the Theurgy abilities as well. The only difference here is that you don't get them via leveling up, you earn these skills by hanging out with your teammates in the dorms and reload. This is similar in Persona 5 Royal. Your party just gets more evolutions of the trait as they level up and evolve their personas too. However, unlike Royal or even Portable, your personas, as in the protagonist personas, do not possess any kind of special traits, which dumbs down the combat significantly. Persona traits or characteristics outright do not exist in Persona 3 Reload, which is a huge letdown. The only inherent trait that the protagonist has is a weakness amp, which is specialized across all kinds of personas. You do some pretty insane damage with this stuff, but still, it lessens the tactical elements of the game significantly. In retrospect, I think this is the ultimate reason why I went for a crit fishing build with an Ose I received from a fusion accident, as the depth and the tactical decisions I could have made within the Velvet Room don't necessarily matter anymore. There's an exponential amount of builds I can do within Persona 5 Royal that I can no longer do in Persona 3 Reload, and that is a shame. The trait system allows for so much replay value, and well, to be honest, it's mostly what I spent most of my time within the Velvet Room doing in my second playthrough of Royal, just trying to see how many personas I can match together to try and come up with something unique and powerful. Speaking of making stuff in the Velvet Room, we have to talk about how this game expects me to acquire rare gear. In both Royal and within Reload, the fusioning process for Persona is just a way to get some rare and exceptional equipment, but the process is so convoluted, confusing, and arduous in Reload that I just didn't want to engage with it. In Royal, in order to create rare equipment and items such as skill cards, firearms, or armor, you mostly had to rely on the electric chair executions in the Velvet Room, with the exception of rare ones appearing only during a fusion alarm. The process normally goes as follows. Summon or fuse a persona, keeping in mind that you need a blank card, model gun, black katana, robe, or rock, of which you naturally encounter organically as you play through the game, by the way, to create the desired item. You then select the execution fusion, hope you don't have an accident, and bam, you have some fairly powerful new items for your party that contain some really powerful stat buffs. No questions asked, no ifs, ands, or buts. You're not locked away or barred from creating the item by any level requirements or anything like that. It's a simple input-output system, which is not at all how Persona 3 Reloaded handles the same mechanic, which I'm going to call the heart item system. Instead of having the player go from A, B to C to craft these items, as was the case in Royal, the system in Reload asks you to interact with the vendors, social links, Tartarus, and with the Persona Fusion system in the Velvet Room to then create these powerful items. Ideally, this would create an entertaining gameplay loop that coexists nicely with the combat and the social links within the game, but in practice, it's just incredibly confusing and unnecessary. Allow me to try to explain the process of crafting a weapon. First, in order to do anything of the sort, you need to wait until the antique shop opens in Paloma Mall on July 18th. Before that, provided you knew what to look out for these following items, and did not do as I did, sell them for more cash to fuse more personas, you need to look out for malachite, black quartz, onyx, and amethysts. Secondly, you need to look out for any kind of item with the word nil in it. These are Persona 3's analogs to the black katana of Royal. The rule of thumb here is that the more words this item description contains, the more powerful the weapon the material will create. Other materials like AS materials, egotite, and dead moon husks are the base material used to create specialized weapons and armor for Aegis and the rest of your party. The appearance and rarity of these items depend on which block of Tartarus you're running through and on the rarity of the shadows that you are fighting. This, of course, is also gimped and hamstrung by how Tartarus is completely random, so there could be fluctuating instances where chests and shadows containing these items don't spawn until the next day resets Tartarus' layout. Sometimes you're able to get these items from fighting the bosses behind the monad doors as well, but still, their appearances are random, and so are the loot in the chest that you obtain shortly after completing the battle. So say I wanted to use one of my collected nil white models to craft the evil gloves for Akihiko. When equipped, this weapon would give him a free heat riser charge at the start of combat. This is a great item for him as it feeds in the mechanics of his Theurgy gauge as we've discussed earlier. In order to craft it, I would need to find at least 5 gold quartz, 3 rubies, and 1 Mara's head. Apart from collecting these gems dropped by shadows, the Mara's head is the hardest item of the set to get, as you need to use Mara, the persona, in the Velvet Room as well. Once you manage to reach to level 75, finish the required confidant arc in order to fuse this persona in the first place, scrape together the money or the required personas needed to fuse Mara, such as Incubus, Pazuzu, Mott, Kumbhanada, and Addis, you will have a random chance of getting Mara's head as a drop once per level up. This means that you and I have 3 ways of getting this item. One choice is to take Mara along with me through Tartarus to level up by having him be the persona in my party that is either equipped when the shadow is defeated by my teammates or when it lands the killing blow upon the enemy. This is how I believe XP is distributed in Persona 3 after all. So if I so happen to be on the floor that Mara is particularly weak in, I either have to suck it up and deal or go with our second option here. We use skill cards to teach growth 3 and stack it with the avaricious ring for the 15% bonus XP, which costs 100,000 yen to buy and locks us out from using any other types of rings until the grind is complete. This, of course, is after we've already dumped about 80k or so on summoning Mara in the first place. It's not ideal, but this would be the strat you would have to do in order to craft these gloves for Aki if you do not have the Tower Arcana maxed out. Even then, when Mara is 6-slotted, it is entirely possible for you to not get Mara's head, which would then require more grinding for a single weapon to level up on the basis of, well, 1 persona leveling up. It's kind of absurd. Reload expects you to go from B to C to A to B to skip step 2 and start the social link as high as possible as you can, and then continue over the story until July 18th, go back to Tartarus a couple times, just to craft this 1 weapon. It's stupid and overly complicated. There are a billion ways to make this more streamlined for quality of life's sake. I'm not sure why we could have just made this mechanic more similar to Persona 5 Royal. I mean, it's as simple as get persona, use the execution chair, and get item. It is really that simple. I'm not sure why this is so overly complicated and why every single mechanic must feed into Tartarus and backwards like this. It is incomprehensible. Everything about this is an objective downgrade from Persona 5, which, given all the inspiration Reloaded takes from Royal, is a huge disappointment once again. This brings me to what annoys me the most about Persona games. Yeah, we're sort of stepping out of our critique of Reload to talk about Persona as a whole now. One thing that's always bugged me about this franchise is how annoyingly vague some of the essential information is about the function and utility of certain items and abilities. I have beaten Persona 5 Royal 2 times and Reload once, but to this day, I still don't have any idea what any of these stats under my Persona's model mean specifically, and the game doesn't offer any kind of explanation or flavor text as to the contrary. I'm trading in all these items in Reload to get more Persona instances to increase my stats for the end of the game, but I have no idea what parameters LU, AG, EN, MA, and ST do. I have no idea by what percentage, or even if it is a percentage, all these freeze amp gear I've given to Mitsuru is actually doing, because I never see the shadows turn to icicles for me to shadow with my Osei. I don't know how having a high chance to freeze or confuse a shadow is improved with stagnant air, or by how much Mudo boost affects my chances of insta-killing something. I do not know by how much Matsurukaja increases my attack power, nor do I know by how much Marukukaja increases my defense by. I only know that it does something, which isn't sufficient enough information. The worst offender is Charge and Concentrate subscriptions telling us that they just boost attack power by just over double. In actuality, the ability grants you 2.5 times damage buff, but you wouldn't know this if you didn't check the wiki. It's functional, but again, as I've said at the start of this video, the form of Persona 3, its themes, always seem to hold more water as opposed to, well, the combat, the very backbone of the game, and its story. I could talk forever about how every single persona each character wields is significant, or on how brilliant of an idea it was to frame Persona 3 around a Greek tragedy, as you, playing as Orpheus, scaling the very depths of hell, of Tartarus itself, was a great way to frame the story. I could talk about how, allegorically, Takaya's persona being Hypnos and Makoto's being Orpheus, being really cool because, well, they're both related to Nyx in Greek mythology, which also places them in a sort of Messiah-esque place as the Christ and the Antichrist version of that tale as well, and of this one in Persona 3 Reloaded, along with a bunch of other things that relate to the other party members' personas. However, what I do want to talk about here is how Persona 3 gets its second win, its redeeming aspects with Ryoji. I talked about how around 30 hours, the game finally gets good after Shinji's death, but when Ryoji reveals who he truly is and tells us that even if we do choose to fight on, we're all gonna die anyway. That is when Persona 3 becomes stellar. First, we are confronted with dealing with our inevitable deaths, of our own mortality for the first time within the game. We've faced countless situations in Tartarus where we came very close to losing it all, but never such in an absolute sense like this. It's a hard date where everyone in existence is going to die, and there's precious little we can do about it, as Ryoji gives us two options. Kill him and have a chance to delay the inevitable at the cost of us forgetting everything involved in the Dark Hour, or struggle in vain as we attempt to fight Nyx. We have a month to decide, and as we make our decision, the city begins to quite literally lose its luster and its color as death approaches. Of course, there's an all-time rise in apathy syndrome cases. Takaya starts a cult to revere Nyx's coming as salvation. People are afraid of something, but their fear seems rather abstract than something concrete or real. And then a sudden panic begins to set in, but not within the cast, but within your own heart. Have you done anything you need to do within this life? Have you spent enough time with those you care about? Have you lived life to the fullest, or were you keen on waiting until something interesting happens? Ryoji's disappearance, the state of the city, and the absence of color made me reconsider which social links, which people I had helped, and those who had outright refused to make connections with. I began to wonder if I had the chance to do it all over again, would I have done it any differently? Rather than looking to the future and putting a pin in my activities in Persona 3, I had less than 4 weeks to get my affairs in order and forge those bonds with those who I cared about. This wasn't because I expected a reward, a fancy new persona, but because I wanted to see Yuko succeed, something to go right for Yukari for once. To help Mitsuru understand that generational guilt is a bullshit concept, and for Chihiro to finally find her own voice. But I didn't have time to do all of this, along with finishing up Aigis' social link as well. Around this time, I was asking, okay, what's the point of forging all these relationships if everyone's going to die anyway? And then it hit me. That's the point. I did my best to forge lasting connections with my friends, but upon a refusal to kill Ryoji, Seize and myself were filled with determination as the best social link in the game was unlocked. Creative Persona of the Judgment Arcana. Nyx Annihilation Team? Oh, that's awesome. And it's the Judgment Arcana. Let's go. Yeah. That's what it's all about. I'm all in, guys. Let's fucking go. Finally, the narrative aspects of the game have coalesced into something meaningful for the theming, the gameplay, and for the social links. With the full Arcana being representative of our journey thus far, and Itsuki's betrayal, encouraging us to slay all 12 shadows to bring about Nyx, we stand here in Tartarus anyway to do battle with her anyway. We were given the option to give up on our ideals for the sake of an ignorant peace, but in the end, it was our determination to stick to the goal of ending the Dark Hour that maximizes the full Arcana and transforms Seize from being such fools to the Nyx Annihilation Team, the Judgment Arcana for Persona 3. While humanity's true Judgment Day might be upon us as Nyx descend from the skies, Seize has a different plan. In our final hours here, as death looms over the entire world, we have gained a deeper understanding of life itself and an understanding of those around us. We know what we need to do, and not even everyone's impending demise will stop us now. As you scale the last 4 Tartarus with the death of humanity airing ever closer and closer, Seize decides to struggle against it anyway. And this thought alone is so powerful. On choice floors, and after certain gatekeeper boss fights, all members of Seize will chime in from both the entrance and from within their own portrait to reflect upon how much this journey has meant to them thus far. Additionally, as you walk around each floor, your team will have some animated dialogue where they will do the same.
My persona represents the strength of my heart. And from here on, my heart will never falter.
If heaven really does exist, would it be a place like this?
No, I get that this place looks the part, but God, please, no.
2 in harmony surpasses 1 in perfection. And with all of us together, we will be even stronger.
I don't have any proof, but we're getting close. I can feel it. Nothing can stop us now. Now that we've made it this far, we've got to see this through.
Some of our party members will completely ignore their impending demise and start making plans for what they're gonna do after January.
We should totally have a girls' night soon. We'll stay up all night snacking and chatting.
Sounds like it'll be a long night. I'll have to free up my schedule for the next day.
I'm a sucker for the power of friendship trope that's ever present within anime, but the way that Persona has always presented this trope has always made me really fall in love with these games. There's just something about Seize refusing to give up that hits just right. We do battle with Nyx, utterly kicking her ass, by the way, but even then, it requires Makoto to pull up his bonds once more to defeat the concept of death itself.
I will
crank it! This is death. One HP.
What can we do? How can we help him?
give up. We're gonna get through this together.
Give him strength! Take my life if you must!
Power of friendship surges within you. Okay.
Don't worry, I'm invincible, so legendary. If I fall down, I gotta get back up, right back up, man, to where I left off. Because I got my crew on the back, I'm already.
You better come back from this. You hear me?
I don't know about that, Yukari.
Don't believe it. He's going to face it all alone.
No, he's not alone. I'm not letting him die.
Don't worry about a thing, it's in my bag, so burn my dread. A little about a situation, every second I was losing patience. Couldn't execute like daily operations. Good, when we have such a deep relationship.
We're not doing enough. It's not enough, it's not enough. It blocked it?
You promised. Didn't you? Please, you have to make it back.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
All right, let's do this.
Power of friendship surges within you. Next core. The Great Seal unleashes the power within to seal Nyx.
Did Nyx create this place? Or was it him?
Yamagishi, is he alright? What happened?
Everything disappeared after being covered in that light. I don't sense anything now.
Don't tell me he...
The hell are you saying?
Saying.
That's impossible. Try again. You can't be the only one. Away.
Damn it! Not again!
Wait, what happened?
We put our lives on the line just like he did. In fact, we came here expecting to die. So why only him?
We didn't fucking make it?
Why am I so powerless? Am I really unable to protect the ones important to me? This is what I was trying to prevent.
You're out there, aren't you? I know you are! I refuse to believe that you're gone! Answer me! I know you're listening!
We're here! Say something, please!
Don't worry.
That voice.
I will sleep once again. Peace will return to this universe. For you. And for him. He's found the answer to life's greatest question. It just happened a bit sooner than it will for the rest of you.
Oh my god.
Life's greatest question.
We didn't make it, boys. We didn't make it. We didn't make it.
Badger Knight from the past, but we did. Well, kinda.
We walk out alive, but as Nyx warns us, our time on this earth is fleeting. Fast forward the last day of school, and as everyone's looking forward to the future, they also notice that we look rather sick and pale. Nevertheless, we have a promise to keep, as we likely ascertain that this will be our final goodbyes to our friends for a future that we probably won't be a part of. Despite this, Yukari makes plans for the future. Plans for us to meet her mother, and for us, as in only us, to head to Destiny Land together for an overnight vacation.
It's about my mom. I want you to meet her.
Really?
I mean, not in a weird way. It's just that if I see her, what if we end up hurting each other? I haven't fully sorted out my feelings yet, but I do want to see her, I think. That's why I thought it'd be great if you could be there with me. You don't have to say anything, really. It's just that I'd feel more confident having you around. And with you by my side, I think I could treat my mom with a little more kindness. Well, let's talk about the near. Want to go somewhere over spring break? Oh, how about Destiny Land? But just the two of us, okay? Like if we stay the night and stuff.
Yuko is still adamant on pursuing her dream in sports medicine.
Hey, remember what I told you before? I never had anything to work towards until now, so I'll admit I'd been slacking off. To be honest, my grades really suck. Like, I have no idea what chemistry and all that stuff is about. Seriously, it's like a foreign language. So that's why, to tell you the truth, but I gotta be patient. That's what I have to keep telling myself. And then I'm gonna do some more studying, and then get a job.
Miyamoto's knee is all better, and he's finally ready to run again, sans his stubborn pride.
Back to the hospital to get it. The results are... It's 100% healed.
Yay!
All I want now.
Happy for you, buddy. Good.
I was so happy, I almost broke the doctor's back. I hugged him so hard.
Chihiro's found her voice once again, and I sure hope that perhaps in some kind of sequel to this game, she becomes student council president.
I want to become strong and reliable, just like the student council president. That's why I want to join the student council next year.
Finally, with the disappearance of the Dark Hour, Mitsuru is able to cap off her whole arc and the rest of the game as well with an absolute banger of a line.
It's hard to believe I've begun to feel like an ordinary high school student. I never knew I had these emotions, just waiting to be given permission to be felt.
That's a cool line. Immaculate. That's a great way to phrase Mitsuru's mindset. What's that thing from Rogue One? I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. Good lord. We say our goodbyes to all of our other friends and colleagues, but as a consequence of our victory, no one remembers our time together at the Dark Hour except for Aigis and us. Which means that they all might forget the promise we made to meet on the school roof to see everyone off as the third years graduate. It is here where Persona 3 reaches its highest high and becomes something truly special.
I remember now.
Yes.
That's right. After my father died, there was a time I lost motivation to live my life.
Am I forgetting something?
The bonds we forge with our teammates cause them to remember us and our time together. But as they all rush to meet us on the roof, we start to get tired.
They're here. I see it now. I have friends. We support each other through thick and thin. Not everything needs to be for some greater purpose. Just caring about someone can be enough. That's all we need to give our lives meaning. As for me, I found my path. And that's to protect you with my life. Thank you so much for everything. You must be tired. Go ahead and rest now. I'll be right here. I won't be going anywhere. In a moment, the others will be joining us.
I'm getting sleepier. My eyes feel heavy. I don't want to press O. I don't want to. I don't want to. I will stay at the screen forever. What are you talking about? My eyes feel heavy. What do you mean?
It'll be okay. I'm right by your side, here to protect you forevermore.
Give me the fucking... No. This brings me right back around to my main dilemma with this game. I think people are obsessed, or rather more in love with Persona 3 more as an artistic concept, more so as what the game itself represents rather than what it is as a video game. There are numerous asinine gameplay mechanics from FES and Portable that should not be in a model remake of the game that still remain as part of the remaster, to the point where it imparts the feeling of making Persona 3 Reloaded feel extremely dated, to the point where I cannot shake the feeling that I'm still playing a PS2 game. After all, every single function of the gameplay feeds right back into reaching the top of Tartarus, all the more easier. I'm not even sure if I want to do another playthrough because Tartarus was so draining and exhausting to get through. But then again, evaluating Persona 3 on that basis alone will be missing the point entirely. Persona 3 is one of those rare instances within media where its theming is arguably a lot stronger than the sum of the gameplay experience than the stories that it wants to tell. Persona in general has always been good at theming, but again, out of everything, even considering Persona 4 and Persona 5 here, I do think that Persona 3 is way better at communicating its themes to the audience than the latter two sequels. Depending on who you ask, this is a feat unto itself, and more impressive for a JRPG of all things to become so lauded, to make such a mark on the cultural zeitgeist in such a way. Persona 3 is one of those games, those millennial RPGs like Culture 1 or 2, like the Mass Effect trilogy, like Fallout New Vegas. A game that has solid enough theming and storytelling that would want to make people wade through each game's lackluster gameplay, technical issues, and memory leaks to experience it all over again, to slog all the way back through 264 levels of Tartarus, twice or thrice more, just to see Yukari Mitsuru blush on Gekko-kun's roof. So I have to ask, what gives? Why do we subject ourselves to such a grind if death and tragedy always await us at the end of each playthrough? That latter question is what made Persona 3 Reloaded so simultaneously interesting to me as the basis for concept and storytelling, but so infuriating to play as a video game. While I enjoyed my time with Reload and what it had to say for itself, I wish I had gelled more with this game. I really do. But as of now, I cannot list it up there as one of my favorites. A fantastic thematic experience about the meditation of death that is weighed down by its more pernicious and offensive concepts and choices. That is where it would stay within my mind at least, but perhaps not within yours. Let me know what you think about Persona 3 or Persona 3 Reloaded or anything else that I've talked about in this video down in the comment section below. Anyway, this has been XBadgerKnightX, and I'll see you all next time. I'm out of here, and goodbye for now.